Welcome to the Mama Podcast. This week, Heidi is joined by Clare, Bourne, a brilliant pelvic health physiotherapist, mum of two, and all-round mythbuster. We're talking what pelvic health actually means, why bowels are the unexpected hero of pregnancy, smart ways to stay active, pelvic floor exercises you can actually fit into real life, and so much more. So whether you're pregnant, postpartum, or simply pelvic curious, take a deep breath and maybe a gentle squeeze, and let's get into it.
Welcome to this episode of the Mama Podcast. I'm Heidi Eldridge, your host and founder and CEO of Mama Academy, and I'm so excited to have Clare with me today. This is going to be such a fun episode. We're going to learn all about pelvic health. So thank you so much for joining us, Clare. Please tell all of us who you are and what you do.
Oh, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's lovely to have a good old chat about this topic. So yeah, I'm a pelvic health physiotherapist. So I am a physiotherapist, obviously, who's trained in looking after musculoskeletal conditions, and with a real passion to do with the pelvis, the pelvic floor, supporting women and men and children, so all ages, with anything to do with the pelvic health. I have a real passion to support those who are pregnant and postpartum. And yeah, I'm delighted to be here today to hopefully highlight some of the issues that we might struggle with. I'm also a mum of two, so I've been pregnant, I've given birth, I've done the journey, and I know how tricky it can be to navigate, even with all the knowledge I've got. So I'm really passionate to get that information out to everyone else.
Oh, that's fantastic. And how old are your children?
They're 8 and 5 now, so they're getting big.
Absolutely. Wow. So that's a lot to navigate.
Lots to navigate.
Lots to juggle. So tell us all about pelvic health. What is pelvic health, and the importance, I guess, of having a physio when you're pregnant?
Yeah, great question. So it's funny because I think pelvic health is a relatively newish term that not everyone's really heard about. And so when they say, like, what do you do? So really, pelvic health is a title, a bit like mental health, encompasses the whole area of the pelvis, and everything that we sort of treat as part of that. So it does include the pelvic floor muscles, but if we just talk about pelvic floor muscles, it kind of excludes so many other things that we need to think about within the pelvic health conversation. So I like to think about it as like the pelvic floor muscles, but also all the muscles around the pelvis, the pelvic bones themselves, and then the pelvic organs that sit within the pelvis. So in a female, that would be bladder, uterus, and bowel. And because the pelvis is quite compact, there's a lot inside it. There's a lot of kind of relationship between things. So if you struggle with your bowels, you may also struggle with your bladder. If you struggle with your bowels, you may also struggle with intercourse. And so there's this kind of like the pelvic health kind of, it's like more of a holistic overview of everything that could be related, because your hip muscles also connect with your pelvic floor muscles. So if we never think about your hip and we only think about your pelvic floor, we could be missing part of the picture.
Right. Okay. So if you're pregnant specifically, what can you do to support your pelvic health?
Great question. So yeah, I always say in pregnancy, it can feel quite an overwhelming time, can't it? Where you're getting like all this information, all this advice, and you just think, do I need this monitor, not that monitor? Do I need this blanket, not that blanket? And it can feel such an overwhelming. We don't even have much time to think about ourselves. Maybe the first time is when we start getting a bit of pain or problems like that. But I would say, look, take a step back and just let's follow some simple principles. So I talk a lot about bowel health because it's actually so integral to everything else within pelvic health. So constipation can be really common in pregnancy. So trying to manage constipation is key. Now, we may not get it perfect, but we do want to be thinking about if you are constipated and struggling. Some people may need iron tablets, some people just may be constipated more naturally. And then with the hormone changes, that also impacts things. But basically what I say is, think about your fiber intake, think about your fluid intake, and movement is really good for your bowels as well. So we want to take care of that as a primary. That's a really good starting point. Getting to know your pelvic floor muscles and actually doing pelvic floor muscle exercises is really important. And we know from research that actually women who do pelvic floor exercises throughout their pregnancy are much less likely to have incontinence, so leakage of urine when they don't want it, at the end of pregnancy or postpartum. So therefore, it makes sense that we should be educating women as early on in pregnancy about what they can be doing to help their pelvic floor. Okay. And then the other thing is just being active. We know that being active is good. And I think there's been so many years of negativity about women exercising in pregnancy and questioning, is it safe or is it not safe? And really, where we're at from a literature perspective, from a research perspective now, is that actually for the majority of us, it is really safe. And not only safe, but highly beneficial to mother and baby. So therefore, being active, it makes sense, right? When we're active, all of our muscles are better. And so your pelvic floor will be better within that as well. And actually, we know that being active can actually help protect against aches and pains as well. So those are kind of my 3 top tips of things to think about when you are pregnant.
That's so interesting, actually, because I always think, yes, exercise and stretching, all that sort of thing is so important to prepare yourself for birth, in effect, really, because it is a bit of a workout in itself, giving birth. What are your sort of exercise tips then? What can we be doing during pregnancy and maybe the lead up towards the end to strengthen certain muscles to get our body ready?
Yeah, so kind of the general feel is if you're already active before pregnancy, there's no reason to stop doing what you love, as long as it doesn't necessarily involve like high altitude running or scuba diving or potentially, and there's conversation around this happening at the minute, but impact sport. Obviously we don't have impact onto the bump. So there are some things that might need modification, or if you're, say, at high risk of a fall, say bouldering or something like that. But for the majority of us, keeping active, maybe that's Pilates, yoga, some strength training, there's no reason to stop that. And basically, you just go for as long as you can, as long as you're comfortable, and then you modify and adapt to your bump as you need to. But really, there's no reason to kind of stop it at all, really. You should just be able to carry on. That's a lot of women get to a point around 30 weeks, so like running just feels awful. I don't want to run anymore. They might prefer swimming, or they might just prefer Pilates. But I think there's a big misconception that you have to stop everything you love and just go and do yoga because you're pregnant. And actually, that can really decondition you and actually make you feel a lot worse. So look, if you're a yoga person anyway, carry on doing yoga. That's amazing. But if you love weight training, don't suddenly be like, well, I'll stop that and just go and do yoga. So it's the message really is that please carry on. Obviously, listen to your medical team. If you have a high risk pregnancy, you have any unmanaged medical conditions, there are definitely, I guess, red tape to some of these recommendations. But for the majority of the population, these things can be carried on, which is really exciting. And as you say, like, I mean, giving birth is, it takes endurance. I always describe it a bit like a marathon. It can go on for quite a long time. There are peaks and troughs. There are times of intense pain. And you hopefully never run a marathon without any training, because let's face it, it doesn't end well when that happens. Therefore, let's have the similar mindset of birth, that actually we're probably going to be pushed to our biggest endurance test during a labour. Let's try and prepare ourselves for it. That's why I always recommend keep strong in your legs, because obviously if an epidural on your back, that's different. But if you're actually upright, you need to be strong. You might be standing for hours trying to keep yourself comfortable, or up and down on the floor. So keep that mindset of what you're training for, and that can help kind of, I think, inspire you to keep going. Because let's be honest, you're tired in pregnancy. It's the last thing you think, oh, I know what I'd like to do, a half an hour workout. It's not always what we want, but actually it's remembering why we're doing it. I think the other narrative I want women to hear is that actually every activity counts, because we all navigate pregnancy differently. So some women will have loads of nausea, loads of sickness, and yes, the last thing you're probably going to want to do is do any form of like high intensity exercise if you're already feeling sick. But all activity counts. So even if that's not what you can do at the minute, go for a walk, get some fresh air. If swimming feels more gentle, or just doing some stretching, it's like all movement is good. So I don't underestimate what you could do, just because it may not look what it did like before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, like you just said, you don't have to exercise for half an hour, an hour. It really is whatever time you've got. So if you've got like a 10-minute window where you can be, like you say, just going out for a little walk or something like that, then it all counts. It's all going to help, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Absolutely. And we know that in day-to-day life. And so it's just understanding that carries on for pregnancy, and just so good for our mental health as well. It's a big time of life to navigate. It's a big time of life to, wrapping up work, maybe, creating a nursery. Financially, it can feel quite intense. So it's really important, I think, to take that time for yourself and feel, nurtured in it, really.
Definitely. That's the time that you can take for you.
Yes,
That's your time.
that's
Because
your
yeah,
time.
it's very overwhelming trying to navigate pregnancy. So if you're not used to doing any exercise,
Mm,
because you're, I don't know, just so busy with life and busy with work
mm,
and things like that, how could you start? What would
yeah.
help your pelvic health if you're
Mm.
not used to going swimming or doing the yoga, for example? What can you be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I would always say start with something really simple like consistent walking. You know, you don't have to go to a class for it to be effective. Do some pelvic floor exercises, you know. There's tons of free workouts on YouTube that are maybe like pregnancy yoga or pregnancy Pilates. You know, if you don't feel confident because it's not your normal to go to a class or be in a more public environment, there are lovely little short videos that you can do. And we know that consistency builds consistency. So even if you said, look, once a weekend I'm going to do 10-minute pregnancy yoga from YouTube, amazing, and then you'll probably feel good for doing it, and then that will inspire you to do a little bit more. But it is safe to start something in pregnancy even if you haven't been. I think it can be this narrative of like, oh well, I've never done it, therefore that's it now. But actually there are so many benefits to navigating small bits in. Maybe finding a friend, you know, who you could do it with, or your partner who maybe is like, I'll do it with you, even if it's not the sort of workout I love, let's try and do something together. I think there's so many ways that you can sort of start to build that in. But equally, as I say, just, you know, doing a walk, even if it's your part of your commute, or getting out on your lunch break and saying to one of your work colleagues, do you fancy just going for a 10-minute round the block and have a quick catch up? Or take one of your work meetings as a walk, you know? It's so many ways I think we can build activity in. It's just being a bit creative about it when life is so busy and hectic. Um,
Mm,
yeah, so I think those are kind of the ways I've always tried to view. I mean, when I was pregnant the second time and I already had a toddler, every day felt like a workout. Like I went to the gym probably once a week, but I was in the
yeah.
park and I was pushing swings and I was carrying a, like, you know, 10-kilogram child, you know. So you just got to remember that if you are already a mother and you're navigating a second pregnancy or third pregnancy, you're definitely not inactive. It just doesn't look traditionally like I went to the gym and I did 30 minutes of weight training. You just did an entire day of weight training instead.
Yeah, yeah. You probably do a lot more exercise than you actually realise.
Totally,
I
totally.
I started getting a bit lazy, obviously, as my kids grew up and they went to school.
Mm,
And I was
yeah.
thinking, right, I've got to force myself out of the house. So I told my friend that I would walk her dog twice a week.
What a good idea.
It's been brilliant because that dog has to have a walk, and I
Dog
feel
has to
very
walk.
I feel very loyal to the dog. So it makes me get out and it makes me have that
Yeah,
break from the laptop and just have that little walk.
that's
And it's
so
so good for me.
good.
So there's lots of things you can put in place to sort of remind yourself to go out
Yes.
and do it. You've just touched upon pelvic floor,
Yeah.
which is a great topic. Talk me through
Yeah.
pelvic floor, and maybe we could do the exercises now together. Why
Absolutely.
not?
Let me get, I mean, for those that can see the imagery here, this is quite help visual. So this is like, imagine this is your pelvis, front of your pelvis here and back to the spine here. Your pelvic floor muscles are this red area here. So there's quite a lot of them. So we hear pelvic floor, but actually the pelvic floor is made up of lots of little muscles, and there's some more superficial ones here. So this is the anus here. This is the vaginal opening. So there's a good number in the more superficial layer, and then we also have a deeper layer. And essentially, these are a group of muscles, and they're skeletal muscles. So they're like a bicep or tricep or quad or hamstring that work together to do so many jobs that we take for granted until they don't work so well. So they keep us continent of urine and bowels and wind. They support our pelvic organs, so like your bladder, your womb, and your bowels. They help work with other muscles to kind of work on spinal stability and just kind of overall body control. They help to pump blood and lymph fluid around the area, which again no one thinks about, but if that wasn't happening you get a lot of swelling. And then there's also they also contribute to our sexual pleasure. So 5 key roles of these muscles, and we just don't really hear about them until we're pregnant. Everyone's like, oh, you're doing your pelvic floor exercise, and we're all a bit like, yeah, I think so. And I see so many women in clinic that come in being like, I've done these for like 10 years, but honestly, I've got no clue if I'm doing it right. You know, it's so different to a bicep curl, for example, where I can look in a mirror or I can look on this screen. I'm like, oh, yeah, look, I'm doing a great technique. with your pelvic floor, you rely heavily on feeling it as a woman, because there is some external movement, but it's not something that you can easily see on yourself. So what we use is a lot of visual cues to help women understand. So for anyone listening to this now, and we can do some together, the amazing thing about your pelvic floor exercise is that there's no external movement to the wider population. So you won't move up and down on a chair. You shouldn't feel clenching of your buttock muscles. You will feel a tightening around the vagina and around the anus, but that's it, and then you'll feel it relax. So what I always encourage women to think about first is think about where your anus is, so where you obviously do bowel motion from, and think, can I just squeeze around my anus and relax around my anus? So squeeze around the anus and relax around the anus. So a bit like an arm, you're squeezing it and you're relaxing it. And then I want you to add on, so you think, okay, I'm going to squeeze around the anus, and then I'm going to bring it forwards through the vagina to the pubic bone. You'll feel a bit of a tightening around the vagina, and then you're going to relax it away.
So can I do this now sitting down? Do I need to stand up?
Absolutely. No, I just sat there, just think, right, I can feel around my back passage, I can then feel my vagina squeezing, and then relax. And I think a big misconception is that it needs to be this massive contraction and we're going to suddenly think like whooping, but it's not. It's actually much more gentle. On and off, if that makes sense.
So I can do this every day whilst I'm doing my work at the laptop. Brilliant.
Yeah. Sometimes people put a sticky dot on their laptop just as a visual reminder that that's their pelvic floor dot, and every time they see it they do 10 or 5 or whatever it is. I really believe we have to make this manageable, because as you say, none of us have more time. We're struggling to do work and to self-care and have a shower and wash our hair and see our friends and go to antenatal classes. We don't have time for another thing to do 5 times a day. So it's really important that we I think make it practical. But you can just do it sitting at your desk. And what I would say is just start off with getting confident in how do you contract and how do you relax. Like, that's step one. If after that you're like, great, I know how to do that, you can then do some on and off contractions, and then you can also do some on and hold contractions and relax. So you can do a bit of both, basically.
Wonderful. We've got some information on our website as well.
Amazing.
So people can go onto the website and they can have like a little recap. But you're right, it's just having that daily reminder. It's
Very
just
much
thinking about it. And obviously you can do it several times a day.
Yeah, we often build up in pregnancy to around 3 times a day. So 10 where you don't hold, and then 10 where you do try and hold it whilst you breathe for 10 seconds, and build up to 3 times a day. But I'm a real realist, and I would say, listen, do not go in with the expectation you're going to do 3 times a day, because you'll fail and then you'll feel like a failure and then you'll disengage with it. It's way better for what we call compliance to start with a really realistic goal, nail it. A bit like what you did, you're like, I'm going to walk my friend's dog twice a week. Like, it's a realistic goal for me. And you've then been consistent at it. Now, I'm sure now you're doing that, you think, well, I could probably add an extra day, or maybe actually I could fit in a Pilates class, or whatever it might be. But if you'd gone with, I'm going to now walk the dog 7 days a week, it would never have happened. And then you'd be like, oh, well, it didn't happen, I didn't do it. So it's the same principle with the pelvic floor. Like, it can feel very overwhelming in pregnancy. So like, now I need to be a pelvic floor expert and do it all the time. But I always say to women, let's be honest with each other, that's not going to happen. So let's start with something and then scale up and build from there.
That's such good advice. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'm just trying to think about the dreaded SPD as well.
Yes.
That a lot of people can suffer with, unfortunately. I actually suffered with this with my youngest, with my daughter.
Okay.
What advice would you give for, pregnant women and birthing people that are really suffering with this, and any advice for their healthcare team as well, and how they can support them?
Yeah, absolutely. So SPD stands for symphysis pubis dysfunction. So this is the at the front of your pelvis, which you'd probably think of just feels like a hard bone, is called the pubic bone, and it's actually where 2 sides of the pelvis join. So there's bone and bone, and then there's like cartilage that brings them together. Nowadays, we generally as physios call it pelvic girdle pain, which is a more, again, like umbrella term to any pain that can occur in the pelvis. Because actually for some women, they will feel it at that pubic bone at the front. And for other women, they'll feel it more in the back of the spine around, the back of the pelvis where their spine joins the pelvis, or more like the joints that we call the sacroiliac joints. but they all might feel it in the buttocks or in the groin, and there's kind of, it can present in many different ways. So we now use this kind of umbrella term that SPD is still very much kind of used day to day, and it's characterized by that very severe pain at the front of the pelvis. The honest answer is well, first of all, that it is treatable. Second of all, it is not all down to the hormone relaxin making your pelvis unstable, and therefore it's like game over, there's nothing we can do. That's actually a very old kind of thought on it, which has now basically been disproven. Now, that doesn't mean that relaxin isn't in the body, that it doesn't increase in pregnancy, and that some joints may get a bit more mobility. But it's not saying that increased mobility at a joint equals pain. Otherwise, 100% of women have increased relaxin. Why would 100% of women not have pain? So what we have to then step back and say is, okay, well, maybe hormones have a part to play, but actually if we blame everything on hormones, we can't change the hormones, right? The hormones are going to happen, but equally not 100% of women end up with SPD or pelvic girdle pain. So there must be something else going on. And I've worked in this field for, I don't know, it's coming on 13, 14 years. So I've seen an awful number of women with this condition, and I suffered with it a bit myself. There are so many contributing factors, is basically, and thorough assessment, which does not involve basic advice and a belt, is generally what gets things better. Now, I'm not saying that belts aren't part of the picture, but when you look at the research, they're actually very low grade evidence for the use of belts alone. Great as an adjunct to, you know, physiotherapy assessment, education, advice, maybe hands-on treatment, exercises. It needs a collaborative approach. So what I feel really sad about, particularly in the UK, is that the narrative is still like there is nothing that we can do. And I treat women who have private obstetricians who are also told by them it's just part of pregnancy. They come to me recommended through a friend, you know, we do a few sessions, their pain has gone. So I'm not saying I'm a miracle worker, but what I'm trying to say is that thorough assessment and understanding of your body is the best thing that you can do. Now, within the NHS, and I worked in the NHS for many, many years before I kind of took time from the NHS, and I now work privately, but you are able to access that support. Now, I can't promise it will be as comprehensive as maybe we would love it to be, but there are teams available. If another medical professional tells you there is nothing you can do, please politely nod and walk away and see if you can get a referral to the physiotherapy team, because it's just not true. And it's a narrative that I hear repeated. And the problem is, then someone tells someone else there's nothing you can do, and then someone tells someone else. And it's very hard to stop that noise when we're all there in clinic being like, there is something you can do. You know, so I think for healthcare professionals, what I often say to them is, you know, there's a great website from our national body called the POGP. So it's called the Pelvic Obstetric Gynecological Physiotherapist. The website is thepogp.co.uk, and they have tons of evidence-based resources on all things pelvic health, and there's a whole section around pregnancy. So even if women want to go and read a leaflet, download a leaflet, there's sometimes some basic exercises in there. And you could even share that with your midwife or with your team and say, actually, I've done some reading and I've realised that, look, it recommends physiotherapy support, or that there is something that I can do. That's what I would probably gently encourage. Look, at the end of the day, we are all learning. So this, for me, it's never criticism. You know, it's so easy to get like midwife bashing or GP bashing or physio bashing. You know, at the end of the day, we can criticise everybody, but only if people know what they know. And actually, we need to be part of that vessel for change to allow people to learn a different way. And we've all said it. You know, when I started off in pelvic health, like 16, I don't actually know how many years ago it is now. You know, we still talked a lot about relaxing, and we've learned a lot in the last 16 years, but that's a number of years. There's a lot of change, there's a lot more research, there's a lot more data. So we all have to keep learning. And I think we have to way and encourage people just to kind of challenge that narrative that's being spread still.
Absolutely, that is so helpful. That is that's like great news for so many people to hear. Good. You know, we will get that information and that website onto our website.
Great.
But yeah, I guess the advice is it's best to see a physio.
At the end of the day, assessment. Absolutely, because we're all individual, and for example, someone may have an old knee injury that's playing into what's happening around their pelvis. Now, that's not going to be the same as the next person. Someone may have a leg length discrepancy where one leg's slightly longer than the other. Someone may have had a previous traumatic birth, and that's played into what they're feeling, or they may have some pelvic floor issues that are also playing in. Like, we have to then look at everything as a whole, and that's where generic advice of do 3 exercises and wear this belt, they may work for some people, but they're not going to work for everyone. And so if we can have that individual assessment, that for me is gold standard.
Absolutely. And postnatally then, what can we expect afterwards in the aftermath, especially if we've suffered with SPD?
Yeah, so most women after birth are like, it was like magic, my pain just went away. And we know by the end of pregnancy we're really heavy, there's a lot of pressure, so it's all quite intense on the pelvis. But majority of women, it will go away. We think around 17% of women will probably have some ongoing pelvic pain, and therefore that might need support and treatment afterwards. But for most women, it's not an ongoing problem. Now, that doesn't mean we don't just forget you had it. Before you maybe go back to running or other high impact exercise, you may want to do some more basic rehab to just re-strengthen. I think we forget, like, even if we've been active in pregnancy, we do decondition to some extent. So it's really important to build that strength back up gradually and steadily.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just trying to think, like, overall, pelvic health overall, what are things that we could be looking out for that might kind of be problematic symptoms, for example? When should we report that to our maternity team?
Yeah, so I think if we look at in pregnancy, again, if you're constipated and you've done all the things that we've mentioned earlier on the podcast and it's not getting better and you're having to significantly strain to go to the toilet repeatedly, you need to flag that to your medical team, and they may recommend a laxative in pregnancy, because constipation alone puts an awful lot of pressure down on your pelvic floor and on your pelvic organs, and that can then lead to other complications later down the line. So we definitely want to try and prevent that as much as we possibly can. So that would be my first step. If you're suddenly experiencing loads more urinary leakage, you're like, every time I cough, I'm really wetting myself, or I'm throwing up and I'm wetting myself, or I can't make it to the bathroom. Again, though common in pregnancy, these are not things that we're just like, oh, well, part of the course, leave it. Again, we should be being proactive about trying to sort that in pregnancy to help you postpartum. And then obviously, if you have any pain, I think those are the 3 things in pregnancy I'd really say flag to your medical team and see if you can get some support earlier rather than later. Postpartum, obviously, there's a whole host of symptoms that we can experience. Birth puts an awful lot of pressure, however we birth our baby, whether we have a cesarean or whether we have a vaginal birth. And it's really important that we know what to look out for, know what's normal, and know when to seek help. So I think we all expect those early days after birth, nothing quite feels right. Okay, so if you've had a vaginal birth, it's very normal for your pelvic floor to feel like it's gone on holiday, and therefore your bladder and bowel control don't feel as normal. And they've been gone through a significant stretch, and sometimes there's been a tear, and there's a lot of healing that needs to occur. However, if those symptoms are persisting at 4 weeks postpartum or 6 plus, or whatever it might be, then that again needs review. We don't just normalize that as, well, you've had a kid now, that's what happens. We know that there's lots that we can do. My message would always be, if you have a new symptom that you don't understand, just speak to a medical professional, even if it's just to get reassurance of, like, let's review in a month or let's review in 2 weeks. Okay, we need to think that through. Other ones would be like a heaviness or this weird feeling within the vagina, feeling like something's in your vagina that didn't used to be in your vagina. Now, again, that can be a really normal feeling in the early days after a vaginal birth. However, if that's consistently there 6 to 8 weeks postpartum, again, assessment required and recommend that. For the majority of women in the UK, they will have a postnatal review. I don't like calling it a check, because a lot of women will say they're not actually checked. So from a physical check perspective. So I think it's a review, and I think it's an opportunity for you to bring things up if you're worried about it. But I think as women, we don't know what we should be worried about, because we're like, especially, I remember giving birth and being like, I have a lot of knowledge, but I don't know if what I'm feeling right now is in line with what I thought I knew, because you've never done it. Now, when you do it for a second time, you're like, oh gosh, yeah, I remember this hurts, or this is uncomfortable, but I know it ends because I've lived it before. Whereas when you've never lived it before, you're just literally clueless, and then you're texting your mates at 3 a.m. being like, why does my boob look like this, or did anyone else wet themselves? You know, you're having to be like Google searching, being like, what's normal? At the end of the day, if you're worried about something, that's where GPs come in, or midwife review comes in. And then they may refer you on to someone like me, who can then give that specialist input and guidance with regards to what you need support with. So I think those are the most things to look out for. If you've had a cesarean, obviously those initial weeks are sore and tender, you've had major surgery. But again, if you're having scar pain that's persisting, or your scar doesn't look how you're expecting it, you know, all these things need medical review with ongoing referral as needed.
That is so helpful. That is really helpful. Thank you. I'm just thinking, we've talked about the importance of pelvic floor muscles.
Yeah.
And preparing them. And I'm just thinking about perineal massage.
Yeah.
As well, because again, it's so simple.
Yes.
It doesn't take much time.
No.
And yet it can make such a huge difference. And
yes.
It's particularly prevalent for Black and Asian women as well, because they're at slightly higher risk of experiencing tears. But obviously everybody should try and do perineal massage. And again, it's trying to remember, it's trying to fit that in. But towards the end of pregnancy, just to, you know, massage the perineal as much as you can. Just to prepare everything ready for labour and birth.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's a great technique, and it's recommended from 34 weeks using like a natural oil and then your own thumb, and basically popping your thumb just inside the vaginal opening and stretching down into the tissues between the vagina and the anus, because these are the tissues that stretch the most during a vaginal birth, and they're the most likely to tear. We're also trying to protect against the more severe tearing that can occur towards the anus, and then obviously that's concerning with regards to our bowel function. So it's a great technique. You know, there is research behind it that it can be really helpful. I always say to women, you know, give it your best shot. It, you know, no one regrets giving it a go. Some people regret not doing it, but also birth is birth, and you can do all the perineal massage in the world, and it doesn't mean that you won't have some degree of tearing, but maybe it wasn't as severe as it could have been. But there are also other factors that are really important, you know, how relaxed a woman feels in her birthing environment, and her medical team around her, and how well she knows the people, and how safe she feels. So I think when it comes to perineal tearing, obviously there can be a lot of focus on perineal massage, and I'm all for it. You know, I'm a soft tissue person at the end of the day. I'm really passionate that we look after our tissues, we help prevent problems. But it's also understanding that I never want a woman to feel like she's failed if she tears after doing perineal massage, because actually there are lots of other factors at play as well.
That's a really good point. So, Claire, I want to congratulate you on your award that you won recently at the Active Pregnancy Awards.
Yeah.
You won Product of the Year for your book.
I know. I couldn't believe it. If you saw a video of me, my jaw nearly hit the floor.
It's just wonderful. It's wonderful. So tell us all about your book.
Yeah, thank you. So it's called Strong Foundations, Why Pelvic Health Matters. And really it's kind of like an exploratory guide that takes the reader on a journey to just understanding their own pelvic health better. Because, you know, since I left the NHS, obviously I work in private practice, and I've always felt quite sad that obviously often what women might describe as like personalised care is very expensive. And though the NHS is amazing, we just sadly cannot meet the needs of all the population when it comes to women's health. You know, I hope things will change in the decade ahead, but we're going to need a lot more funding. So I guess my passion was that if I could almost bring the clinic room and pop it in a book on the journey I go on with women on a one-to-one basis, and almost take that and pop it in one guide, that's what I wanted to do. So the book sort of starts with just tons of education, like all the stuff as women we're never literally told about our bodies, and you suddenly are like, oh yeah, where is my urethra, and like where is everything, and like what is this anatomy that I've never really been taught about. And then it goes through different stages of life. So it actually looks at childhood and talks around kind of like some of the problems that some of us would have in childhood that we again got normalized and we never dealt with, and they kind of carry on through our lives. It then has a huge section around pregnancy, immediate postnatal recovery, like all you need to know to look after your body in pregnancy and postpartum. And then exercises that I would recommend as a good place to start doing some rehab. There's tons packed in there. And then it goes into kind of problems that you might experience, like incontinence or prolapse or bowel symptoms. And then it goes on to menopause and kind of postmenopause and kind of that part of the conversation. So it's kind of the idea of it like bookends a woman's life, and whatever you need, you can kind of jump in and read that section. So you could buy it and just read the pregnancy and postpartum bit and then read the menopause bit in 10 years when you need it, or you could read it back to front to back, or you could literally pick up at the back and just read the menopause section. So that was kind of my vision for it. And it's been lovely to hear stories, or medical professionals that have read it because they didn't know anything about pelvic health, women that have used it to literally sort their own symptoms out, where they were like, I couldn't get an appointment, so I read the book and I implemented everything myself. So yeah, I loved writing it. It was a really kind of enjoyable therapeutic process. I've loved hearing the stories, and at each end of each chapter is like a journal page, so you can actually write down reflections or what you've learned, or oh gosh, I didn't even realize I did that sort of thing. Maybe that's something I should address. So yeah, it's there in the world, ready for anyone to use.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. So how can people find it? How can you buy it?
Yeah, so it's in Waterstones. So you can find it in Waterstone stores or online or on Amazon. That's where lots of people get their books these days. It's also on Kindle. You can have me read it to you as an audiobook.
I love that.
So I've had loads of friends who actually just listened to it in the car and sort of gone to the chapters they need, and then they've sort of implemented those changes. So, for me, I really believe in accessibility, and I don't think pelvic health should be a privilege. I also appreciate I work in privileged places of private practice, but I'm very passionate about breaking down the barriers of the clinic door and taking the information out there. And for me, you can sometimes get it for £7 on Amazon. I think, gosh, the privilege to be able to get something for £7 that you can then use and implement changes for your life, also try and prevent problems, the more we can do, the better.
It sounds brilliant. I'm definitely gonna go and find that. When I do my walks, I listen to podcasts. Absolutely. So I'm definitely going to do that. That sounds absolutely fantastic. So in your private practice as well, whereabouts are you based? If someone wanted some physio or wanted to come and see you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so personally, I work in 2 locations in London, one in central London and one in the Chelsea area. I also have a team that do home visits all over London, and also in some areas of Dorset, Oxfordshire and Sussex as well, because again, we really wanted to take care to women in their homes. If a lot of us got kids or work, it's lovely if someone can just pop in, give you a treatment session and leave. So there's that option. I also do a lot of virtual care kind of globally as well. So if there are people in other countries struggling to get support, or in other areas of the UK, then yeah, for me, it's about accessibility wherever that might be. So generally the best thing is to look at my website, which is clare-bourne.com, and then there's generally links to everything that people need. And I also now have I run a clinic for children in London as well. So if there's any parents listening and you're like, my children struggle with their bladder and bowels, then we also want to support you as a family, because so many problems that start in childhood often stay with people way beyond. We just don't deal with it well in that time, and so we're really passionate about trying to sort of nip those problems in the bud as a preventative piece, so we're not then getting through life maybe to menopause and think, well, I've actually had this problem since I was 10, but I just didn't do anything about it. So that's an option as well.
Fantastic. Well, I knew this episode was going to be fascinating. I knew I was going to learn so many different things. So yeah, if you're listening, please go and check out Clare Bourne's website. And there's lots of information obviously about pelvic health on our website as well. Thank you so much, Clare. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure we will speak to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, share it with a friend or colleague. Make sure you follow us so you don't miss out on our next episode. If you'd like to support our work by fundraising or volunteering, please email contact@mamaacademy.org.uk. For more information on pregnancy and maternity services, please visit our website at www.mamaacademy.org.uk. We're also on all of your favourite social media channels. See you next time!